And thank you for being here. If you'll take your seats. With all 9 board members present, we're going to call this special called meeting to order. And leading our moment of silence and pledge of allegiance will be Ms. Owen tonight.
Stand for a moment of silence. Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a couple of announcements. Please join our career and technical education students this Friday, May the 4th, from 7 until 9 p.m. on Market Square for our CTE Goes Live. This annual event showcases the skills and talents of our students in every area, from cosmetology and marketing to social media and photography. So please come and bring your family for this fun system-wide event, again, Friday, May the 4th, from 7 until 9. Recognizing elected officials, we want to welcome State Representatives Eddie Smith and Rick Staples, Commissioners Evelyn Gill, Dave Wright, and John Schoonmaker, and City Council Stephanie Welch. Is there anyone I've overlooked? Gwen McKenzie. Sorry. Thank you, Gwen. I didn't see you come in. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome to you all. Ms. Hill, you have some guests you wanted to recognize, I believe.
I do. I just wanted to recognize a special class that's here tonight from Hardin Valley Academy. It's TAP, which is Teachers as Professionals. They had invited me a few weeks ago to come speak to them, and when I was talking about the role, they decided next thing they wanted to come and see us in person. So, Ms. Cheryl and your group, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad you're here.
Okay, are there changes to the agenda? Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Roundtree. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Next, we have public forum. Ms. Roundtree.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our first speaker is Kerwin Fricks. And then after Kerwin will be Zavira Presley.
I am Kerwin Fricks. My daughter is a magnet transfer student at Green Magnet Academy. She is also in the Gifted Talented program. On April 9th, a school board member reminded us about the purpose of magnet schools and questioned whether reading proficiency data was an appropriate measurement of magnet school success. Dr. Daphne Odom explained that the purpose of magnet schools is to nurture an ability, a talent, or an interest. Therefore, reading proficiency is not the correct measurement for assessing magnet school success. However, if reading proficiency data continues to be used to justify the elimination of magnet programs at Green and Sarah Moore Green, we need to look at the reading proficiency data across all Knox County schools. 13,787 Knox County elementary students were tested on their reading proficiency. 8,302 were found to be not proficient. Green and Sarah Moore Green accounted for 405 students, leaving 7,897 elementary students across 48 Knox County schools who are not proficient. Of those 48 elementary schools, 47 are the traditional non-magnet school model. Therefore, there is no basis for the argument that students' reading proficiencies will improve by eliminating magnet programs and returning to the traditional non-magnet school model. In addition to the inappropriate use of reading proficiency as measurement of magnet school success, an REA report was used to justify the cuts to and elimination of magnet programs. The board's refrain on April 9th was magnet schools are not working and they have limited parent demand. Portions of the REA report titled Executive Memo Evaluation of the KCS Magnet Schools directly contradict those claims. To refute the claim that magnet schools are not working, page 1, paragraph 3 states, there was statistically significant evidence that Austin East High increased the percent of students scoring as proficient or advanced at a faster rate than the district over this period. This means Austin East was able to decrease the gap between themselves and the district. There was evidence that Sarah Moore Green Elementary and Beaumont Elementary also improved this figure at a faster rate than the district, but these results did not meet the test for significance. Page 2, paragraph 2 states, there was statistically significant evidence that the percent of students scoring as below basic decreased for Austin East and Sarah Moore Green at a faster rate than the district, thus making progress toward closing this gap. This figure also decreased faster than the district at Beaumont Elementary and Vine Middle, but the results were not statistically significant. To refute the claim that magnet schools have limited parent demand, page 3, paragraph 3 states, there was a statistically significant increase in the proportion of magnet transfer students to non-magnet transfer students at Beaumont Elementary, Green Elementary, Austin East High, Fulton High, and West High. There was a slight increase at Vine Middle, but the results were not significant. The Board of Education has already set a precedent of taking funding and educational opportunities from the students in East Knoxville. The 2017-18 budget cut 12 teaching positions at Austin East. This fall, the KCS director of the Career and Technical Department violated 6 policies and was suspended without pay for pushing through a $450,000 culinary arts classroom in a West Knox County high school without the board's approval. As a result, money that should have been used to complete authorized projects for the students at Austin East was instead taken by the board in October of 2017 to pay for the unauthorized culinary arts classroom. An October 2017 News Sentinel article reporting on these unauthorized funds stated, district officials said they would look for savings and extra revenue throughout the year with the hope of replacing the funds. 1 month later, in November 2017, the board quietly cut the gifted and talented staff from 20 to 13. And now with this budget recommendation, our East Knoxville students are once again in a position to be defunded and denied educational opportunities by the school board. Time and time again, this school board has gone out of its way to blatantly undermine East Knoxville schools by using inappropriate tools to measure magnet school success, misrepresenting data, cutting teaching positions, and usurping funds. Yet this school board continues to have the audacity to tell us with a straight face how these East Knoxville schools aren't working. And now the revised budget pits magnet schools against each other, fighting for their share of $160,000, but only if the board approves. The writing is on the wall, but we fear not because God is just. For not only is God with us, but so is Brown v. Board of Education, the 14th Amendment, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Thank you.
Vera. Zavira. And after Zavira, if Shannon and Caitlin Cupfair could line up as well. Thank you.
When I walked into Vine on the first day of school last year, I wasn't nervous or scared like most people are on the first day. I was excited because I would get to dance in school, which in the end helped me do my schoolwork better. You can go to Vine and ask any of the other dancers or artists if and how having 2 related arts classes a day helps them. You'll find the common answer is we get a break to relieve stress that refocuses us on our work. Magnet programs are important for students, especially in inner city communities like East Knoxville. I'm from the West Side, and though I've never thought the East Side was less than in any way, it's certainly criticized like it is. Students on the East Side in general, from no particular school, are scrutinized because of what our grades and test scores are thought to be, regardless of what our grades are like in actuality or the growth rate. So we're thought to have terrible grades and test scores, but are at risk of losing programs that help us improve them. It's almost like no one is rooting for the East Side. For instance, I don't think the school board necessarily premeditated taking money from the inner city schools, but when budget cuts needed to be made, it was the magnet schools that were targeted. Well, not all the magnet schools, because no one ever thought about cutting L&N STEM or Career Magnet Academy's budget. West High School was given the IB program a few years back, and while it isn't technically a magnet school, it is at all of the magnet fairs, and you're able to apply for a magnet transfer to that school. So while it isn't technically a magnet school, it's definitely treated as one and gets a grant for its special programs. So it seems as though the only magnet schools being affected by the cuts are the primarily African-American ones in the inner city. I'm not trying to pit schools against each other or advocate for their budgets to be cut, I'm just pointing out the bias. There's no reason only certain schools' budget should be cut when it'd be much less detrimental to take a little from every school. Most schools are affected, but less money is cut from each school, so it's easier to adjust. There are 88 schools in our county, so if we absolutely have to cut budgets, why can't we just cut a little from everybody's? If the school board wants higher test scores for schools like Green Magnet and Sarah Moore Green, then they should keep their magnet programs, for they're the reason the schools are as good as they are now and growing. Good academics aren't the only things that matter in our lives. Schools are supposed to get us students ready for the workforce, higher education like colleges and trade schools, making a positive future for ourselves, etc. If a student doesn't make the best grades, it doesn't make them less equipped for any of those. Maybe college a little bit, but that's debatable. More on that in a second. Offering students effective ways to express themselves and have an outlet for their emotions when they're young prevents them from using negative ways of expression and coping mechanisms in the future. Our schools may not produce the most academically strong students, but they definitely produce creative, cooperative, and passionate students. As humans, we're constantly faced with problems and have to find a solution. Like right now, we have to figure out where to get this money. Maybe we don't have as many kids whose test scores are through the roof, although that number is undeniably rising. But we have kids who know how to lead and work with others and find creative solutions to difficult problems. On a different note, magnet programs let us explore interests and give us many great extracurriculars to put on college applications. Speaking as someone only in the 8th grade, colleges seem to want individuals who are either well-rounded or extremely pointed in one area. Pointed as in won a Pulitzer Prize or some other great achievement. So if a college has to choose between someone with great grades and no extracurriculars or someone with good grades and many extracurriculars, who are they more likely to choose? One reason justifying this budget cut, voiced by Tony Norman on the work session at April 9th, was that students at Austin East High School don't act like students at Farragut. On the recording of the meeting at the timestamp 1:49:35, he says, when I think about students at AE, they should be just like students at Farragut. I recommend you all go watch the video as he elaborates more on what he's saying. But to me, it seemed like he was explaining that students at AE aren't deserving of their magnet program and funding and Project Grad because they don't act like the students at Farragut. We can't expect kids at AE to act the same as kids at Farragut because they have different areas of expertise. Farragut as a whole may be traditionally academically stronger than AE as a whole, but Austin East as a whole may be artistically and creatively stronger than Farragut as a whole. Two schools with totally different strengths won't perform the same in some areas. So it's unfair to expect them to. Austin East is a predominantly black school, so it will be looked at as less than Farragut no matter what. So those students know the type of struggle a predominantly white school will never understand. So no, they won't be the same as kids at Farragut. Every school has their struggles and their weaknesses, so it's unfair to expect them to act in the same way. All in all, the magnet cuts are a bad idea. They're taking our inner city schools backwards instead of forwards, and they're coincidentally only affecting our majorly African-American populated magnet schools. If we took a little bit of every school's budget, we wouldn't be making any major negative impacts. Sure, we'd all have to adjust, but it won't be too difficult because it'd be such a small amount from every school. Honestly, voting yes to this motion would have more negative consequences we'd have to address in the future. So I hope you all vote no. Thank you. Wait. It's pronounced Xaviera.
Shannon Cupfair.
So Caitlin's going to go first.
That's fine.
Hi, my name is Caitlin, and I am in the 5th grade at Farragut Intermediate. I wrote this before the decision to continue the GT program was made, but I appreciate that I am still able to share it with you. I am a student in the GT program. I love GT. It is fun and engaging. We do fun educational activities that we could not do in other classes and challenge our brains. Even though I am going to middle school next year, I would be very disappointed if the GT program was removed. I am glad future students will have the same opportunities and experiences that I have had. On the GT website, it states the mission of the Gifted and Talented Department is to support teachers in their efforts to meet the needs of advanced learners through intellectual challenges and opportunities. If the GT department was removed, the needs of advanced students would be unmet. This would lead to bored students who are unchallenged and not engaged or uninterested in classes. I'm glad the GT program will continue. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. I will start by saying I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongues. And I'm asking you, sirs and ma'ams, at the top of my lungs, please use your voices until they get sore, because our kids in public schools deserve so much more. Thank you, Dr. Seuss, for inspiring the young and the old. My name is Shannon Kupfer, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone tonight. You've also received a few emails from me. Caitlin is my 5th grader. I also have a daughter in 2nd grade at Farragut Primary School. We moved into Knox County Schools at the beginning of the 2016-2017 school year. And while I am here primarily to express my support for the Gifted and Talented program, I also want to say that I absolutely 100% support Project Grad, our magnet programs. I think all of these programs are so important for all of our kids. So I just wanted to put that out there. Before I get to GT, there are a couple things. I did a lot of research, and I can't cover it all here, but there are 2 things that I think are worth addressing. And again, I'm sorry, I'm not from Tennessee, so I had to learn how funding works and everything, but that was really fascinating because I think in all the research I did, I talked to Knox County Commissioner John Schoonmaker. The main message or the thing that I learned was, and this is through no fault of the school boards, but Knox County schools are underfunded, period. There is not enough money for the school district. And so I hope that together, parents, the school board, our teachers, our administrators, the community, our students, we can invite our legislators in and we can tell them that they have got to increase funding for public schools. None of these programs should be on the chopping block. They are too important to our kids. When you look up the research or the statistics, I read something the other night that said in 2000 that school funding, when you take into account inflation and various economic factors that I do my best to understand, that school funding across the nation has actually decreased since 2008. That's pretty sad given the expectations that we put on teachers and children today. How are they supposed to be successful and achieve when we as adults don't stand up for them and use our voices and say, this isn't okay? They are our future. They are our leaders. They're our voters. They're future parents. They're educators. They're our community. And if we don't show them what it means to stand up for them, to use our voices, to make our legislators or whoever it may be fund schools, what are we telling them? They're our most important asset in this world, and we need to treat them all that way, regardless of race, color, creed, status, socioeconomics, all of that. I also found it interesting, a couple other stats to throw out. National student expenditure, the national average is about $11,800. Tennessee's is around $8,900. Again, I know there are arguments about whether or not how much student expenditures help improve things or not, but I think it's important to recognize these things, as well as our property taxes are half the national average. Most states fund public schools in some way through property taxes. And I know some of you agree with me on these things, but I want to put it out there. We just need to get more funding for our schools. Oh boy, a minute left. The other point, please in the future, transparency and communication. I was really disappointed to find out about how things were handled with the GT program as a parent and as a human resources professional. If the way it was handled, telling the teachers in November, dragging it out, not letting them talk to parents or principals, like that is a morale crusher. That is a way to chase your employees away. So please, 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 in the future, let's discuss as a community before we lose parents, students, and our great teachers. Last but not least, since I'm running out of time, as far as the GT program goes, thank you for saving the pullout. But at the same time, please save our coaches, because the Gifted and Talented program, it's not just like a smart kid thing. This serves students who are not engaged in the regular curriculum. They're not, they don't necessarily find a fit there. They want their place, and that's their place. So as Dr. Seuss, I will leave you with this final quote. So in an effort to provide excellence for everyone, we've got to make noises in greater amounts. So open your mouth, lads, for every voice counts.
Florence G. Florence G. And then after Florence, Sarah Grizel.
It's actually Florence Jai.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Florence Jai, and I'm the Parent Resource Center Coordinator and Sign Language Teacher at Whittle Springs Middle School. I want to express how much Project GRAD has not only impacted our students, teachers, and families vastly, but also our Parent Resource Center. Project GRAD has afforded Whittle Springs with a plethora of opportunities, including but not limited to the Bow Tie Club. This club teaches young men and women ages 11 to 13 how to be confident, strong, and become the leaders they are destined to be, under the direction of Mr. Corey Hodge. Additionally, Project GRAD over the years have provided hundreds of Thanksgiving baskets to families in need, some of whom would not have otherwise had the means to provide their families with a meal. Project GRAD also has a backpack program in which every Friday, students whose families are in need of food are able to report to Mr. Hodge's office to obtain a backpack discreetly filled with food for their families. Without Project GRAD, many of these students and families would not have food to eat. Project GRAD also provides Angel Tree to numerous children so that on Christmas morning, they will be able to have presents under the tree. Furthermore, Mr. Hodge puts on a resource fair every year so that families can be well informed regarding community resources, as well as teaching parents how to build community partnerships. Mr. Hodge makes sure to acknowledge and show gratitude to our teachers for their hard work by celebrating us during Teacher Appreciation both in the fall and spring semester. Additionally, he does the same for our bus drivers through service, which also teaches students indirectly how to have a heart of humility and gratitude. As a Parent Resource Center Coordinator, Mr. Hodge has assisted me in many ways for several of my events, including but not limited to College and Career Readiness Fair, Family Fun Night, International Festival, Family Movie Night, Suicide Prevention Class, Being Me and Loving It, a self-esteem workshop, to name a few. Moreover, I work closely with other Project GRAD schools in Knox County, including Fulton High School, as well as Spring Hill Elementary. Mr. Hodge himself received support from Project GRAD from kindergarten all the way through college. Graduating from Austin East High School and obtaining his bachelor's degree in Africana Studies with a minor in English from the University of Tennessee. Mr. Hodge could have moved out of state, but he chose to feed into the community and schools that supported him throughout the years by not only working for Project GRAD, but making it his mission to empower students by letting them know that anything is possible. Furthermore, Mr. Hodge is an author, and he is now working on his master's degree in education. So as you can see, Mr. Hodge and so many like him are a product of Project Grad and is doing great things because of all the love and support they receive from Project Grad. I want to reiterate how instrumental Project Grad has been for our school, students, families, and that removing it from our schools will be detrimental, not only to the students and families, but for all the countless men and women who are employed by Project Grad, as well as student volunteers. My hope is that you will consider the thousands of students, mothers, and fathers who will be greatly impacted by your decision, not only today, but for generations to come. Thank you.
Sarah. And then after Sarah, Keon Brown.
My name is Sarah Grizel, and I'm a special education teacher at Green Magnet Academy. I have taught students with varying disabilities for 13 years now, and despite what Ms. Roundtree stated a few weeks ago, those students who struggle to read can and will succeed, including the students at GMA. In fact, we are reading and writing with the best of them. Show it, Sophia. My daughter wrote all of this yesterday in response to the proposed budget cuts. I've emailed each of you what she wrote. But in some, she writes that she is scared that teachers could lose their jobs. On multiple occasions, she wrote that it is terrible and she hates it. She wants to do something. She worries that she won't be able to attend Green anymore. She states her love for the school, her teacher, the design lab, and expo night. One of the last things she writes is, "Please do not take our money," and states that she is sad. Every one of our children benefit from the Magnet program. It provides a different approach to learning, which our students love. No one knows better than the teachers and staff in the school every day what it is that our students need. If only you would listen to us. You have failed to recognize that we at GMA have the second highest growth index score from 2015 to 2017 out of all Knox County elementary schools. We have attained these scores despite the fact that we have the highest percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. The Tennessee Department of Education has provided data that states that we have shown, and I quote, "significant evidence that the school's students made more progress than the growth standard." Stop focusing on the one negative data point about proficiency. You cannot base our Magnet program off of one reading test. Not only am I a teacher at GMA, I am also a parent. I am a parent who requested a Magnet transfer for my daughter to attend Green instead of our zoned school of Sequoia Elementary. The thing is that I live about half a mile from Green Magnet, but I am not zoned to attend there. Board Policy E-171 states students within an area of 1 mile from the school are not eligible and shall not have transportation services provided by Knox County Schools. Don't you find it odd that I can see the school from my bedroom window on Gay Street, yet we are zoned for Sequoia? Knox County pays for a bus to pick up all the students around me to drive them across town to an elementary school where only 6% of students are minority and 4% are economically disadvantaged. GMA's population is 84% minority and 75% economically disadvantaged. This is racial and socioeconomical segregation. Taking away the Magnet programming will further this segregation. Isn't that the opposite of what should be happening? You're proposing to cut the Magnet budget by 67%, which is a total of at least $880,000. These major cuts will deprive our students of a chance to spend time in the design lab where they get to work through the engineering design process from start to finish. This is where some of our students excel the most and is a much needed skill for their future. The cuts will also rob our kids of STEAM studies, where they're able to see different job opportunities all around the city of Knoxville, not just in their neighborhood. Not only do you intend to cut our money by well over half, but you are pitting the community schools against each other by making us compete for what little money is left. You say you are giving us 3 teaching assistant positions. You're not. We already have those positions provided to us through our magnet funding. What you are doing is taking 2 full-time teacher positions and our magnet facilitator, Sandy Morris, from our school. The magnet facilitator who spends all her time planning the STEAM studies and Expo nights, as well as bringing in more transfer students. She has given tours to countless families, showing off what we do. Because of that, we have a waiting list to get into our school. Not only has she given tours to families, but also to the Tennessee Commissioner of Education. Dr. McQueen heard about the great things happening at GMA and came to see it herself. For the past 3 years, Green Magnet has been asked to host the Tennessee Innovative Leaders Institute for educators and administrators from across the state to share our program. They come here so that they can learn from us. Those educators and administrators then take back what they learned from GMA and implement it at their own schools. How can you be aware of all of this and still say that our magnet program is not working? Well, maybe it's because you don't even know what is happening. You don't take the time to see and experience it for yourselves. In the past few weeks, only one of you has made a visit, and honestly, that is too little and too late.
Slay will be next.
My name is Keon Brown. Last time I had a prepared speech, but I wasn't prepared for the things that I heard when I was here. I was actually very disappointed. First of all, with all due respect, I want to respond to Tony Norman. When you said A at Austin East isn't the same as Farragut High School. As an educator, that was not only disrespectful for the people that grind out every single day, but it was also disrespectful to my daughter who attends Austin East High School and her friends. She was very disappointed in that, being that she is going to accept a 4-year academic scholarship to the University of Tennessee. The next thing that I wanted to address today was, you know, with leadership, you have to have consistency. So when you speak about Green Magnet Academy, we've had 4 principals in the past 6 years, and I've endured each one. And each year, hopeful to, you know, move the school in the right direction. The next thing I wanted to address was our magnet funding possibly being cut. And it's so confusing right now. I'm not really sure what's going on. So I'm not sure if the funding is being cut, you guys found some money, or where are we? Like, I'm not really sure. I don't really understand it. It's kind of like a smoke screen, you know? So I wish one of you would explain that to me. I'm at Green Magnet every single day, Monday through Friday, from about 7 o'clock to sometimes after 5:30. So if you would come and please explain that to me so I can explain it to our kids, that would be nice. The next thing I wanted to address was we haven't asked for a new school possibly in over 50 years. Our school is called Vintage, but it is falling apart. It's very old. But what we are asking for is funding to help us keep our programs like the robotics program, the design lab. Sandy Morris sets up these STEAM studies, and this is where our kids get on site, so they get to see. Like, we go to Petty Welding. This is a neighborhood business that our kids get to go to and see how things work. And often employers in the now are looking for kids with skills to get them in the 21st century learning, such as like the 4 C's: collaboration, critical thinking, and communication and creativity. Our kids are very concerned about you guys possibly taking these programs away from them. And I don't really have too much more to say. You know, I do like my job, but I just hope you guys think about the impact of your choices, and I do hope that you vote no on the cuts, but not only vote no on the cuts, but help us better understand what you're, gonna offer us, not competing against each other. I mean, I feel like if we have to compete, you have teachers like myself that's willing to grind out, and we will compete with anybody in any school in Knox County. Thank you.
For our next speaker, I would like to remind the public that according to policy B180, the chair or vice chair shall have the authority to terminate the remarks of any individual who does not adhere to public forum rules and chooses to be an abusive to an individual board member. So I'm asking at this time that if you have future remarks that you don't address them to specific board members as such. So just
Play.
James.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is James Slay, and I'm an assistant principal at Green Magnet Academy. So this is very dear to me. But I just want to clear up a major misconception. But before I do, I want to give you a little background information about me. I was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. And like the majority of my students that I serve, I grew up in the inner city. I attended Bearden Elementary, then went to Beaumont Elementary before it was a magnet school and trendy to go to. I was there and saw the inequities in education. I was there and I witnessed that for myself as a student. Then I went to Beardsley Middle, and we all know what happened to Beardsley Middle. The school was falling apart and hadn't been taken care of. It was dilapidated. I know the inequities in education. I went to Bearden Middle from there as we were transferred over, going on a bus 20, 30 minutes, having to get up at the crack of dawn early morning, and then I went to West High School. And this may come as a surprise to many people, but I wasn't a model student. I was on my way to becoming a statistic until my junior year in high school when one of my principals, Mr. Jim Pryor, told me the truth. He said, "Look at your skin." I said, "I know, it's beautiful." And in his prophetic words, he said, "I like it, but not everyone else is going to like it." He said, "You're a black male, and it's already hard for you. So why are you making it harder for yourself? Education is your opportunity, and you're wasting it." What he said and the way he said it really resonated with me, and I turned my life around. My point of view changed as I began to see how much my teachers and principals really cared about me. I say that to say this: it was the people involved in my education that I attribute my success to because I knew that they cared. Now, you can ask any parent of any child in my school if they feel like our district cares about them, and they will reply with an emphatic no. And budget recommendations such as this one only solidifies this belief. However, I want to assume a more positive presupposition. I want to believe that you spent your resources and time campaigning and getting elected because you want to do what's best for children. I'd like to think you spend countless hours combing through paperwork and attending these meetings because you want to ensure that our children, all of our children, are getting what they need. I stand speaking before you today because I feel that you do care. But there is some confusion about the intended purpose of the Magnet program. The Magnet program was implemented in predominantly black inner city schools to promote diversity and collaboration with students from different socioeconomic backgrounds, not to boost test scores. Speaking of which, there are other factors that go into achievement scores that aren't taken into accountability. The biggest being the high turnover rate that Green has suffered through. There have been more than 60 staff members that have left the school within the last 5 years, including administration. Now, if you go back to what I said previously in my aforementioned statement, that I performed better because I knew that people cared. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because Ms. Holman is the third head principal within this time frame, and that makes a huge impact on student learning. However, I am convinced that we have the right people in place to positively impact learning. Please give us the adequate resources to do so. I know that you have to make tough decisions, and I do not envy you. This is about all of our children, and we must go beyond our represented districts and look into doing what's right for each and every child, including the ones that represent marginalized populations and don't look like you. Because for many of them, education is the only opportunity that they have for success. And I stand as a witness to that. That is the only reason that I'm here. Thank you for your time.
A. Boswell.
Hi. I have come to speak in support of all Knox County magnet school programs. I'm here to tell a personal story, my son's story. And I'll try not to cry, because this is personal. My son Hugh is in the 4th grade at Beaumont Magnet. This is his first year in public school. Up until this point, I homeschooled him. My son is mentally differently abled, or also known as high-functioning autistic. Therefore, it was a scary proposition putting him into a full-time program. We are zoned for Cedar Bluff Elementary, which is an excellent school with high test scores, but it was not the best fit for Hugh. My son struggles with social situations, but has always had a passionate love for the arts, especially theater. These activities are his window to the world. He was afraid to enter school, but when we visited Beaumont, he saw a play there. He was determined he wanted to go. We are so grateful that we received a transfer. Last spring, I met with the excellent support staff at Beaumont, and we discussed a plan for Hugh. We knew there would be challenges integrating him, but this staff was prepared, and we felt very encouraged. Hugh has mainstreamed very well with very little accommodations. I understand that you believe transfer students cost the system more money. I'm here to tell you that this is not the case. Because of the arts programming, Hugh has become engaged and self-motivated enough to get through the other parts of the day that would be overly challenging in a non-magnet school. Our personal therapist agrees. If he were at Cedar Bluff, chances are he would require an aide or a coach to manage. At Beaumont, he does not even need an IEP. His needs have been met, and he is excelling. I think our family adds to Beaumont in many ways. I will be the treasurer for the PTA next year, which supports the entire Beaumont community. Every time there's a need for donations, my family tries to give as much as we can, if not double. We know that there are some families at Beaumont that can't. When I volunteer, I don't volunteer just for the magnet kids, I volunteer for the whole school. And I just want to remind you, and I know someone else said this already, but to remind you what magnet programs are for. By definition, they have special courses or curricula. That refers, and it is the point of it is to draw kids from other parts of the county. We are drawn to Beaumont because of the magnet programs. We drive 20 minutes each way every day for that programming at Beaumont. When the magnet programming started, those schools were searching to diversify, to improve the quality of their offerings. Beaumont has built up their programming, their staffing, their reputation, and now has a waiting list for transfers. Some of our magnet schools are still building their programs. Don't cut them off now. Hello? Please reconsider the budget and give the entire magnet program in Knox County all the funding to establish a world-class education for all the students. I understand that there is a fund balance of $26 million that is available to you. Have you considered asking the county for it? I also understand that the county commission has already stated they're willing to give the money for this shortfall. Our schools are being frugal already. They need more money, not less.
Jessica Boconhel. And then after Jessica, Cheryl Burchett, April Ellis.
Good evening. Jessica Boconhill, and my son goes to Beaumont Magnet Academy, which is a school we are zoned for and happily attend. As a mother to a Knox County kindergartner, my family is just getting started on our journey into the public schools arena, and so I remain cautiously optimistic that we can create space for ongoing dialogue around the ways that your collective school board decisions impact the collective future of our youth. I was one of the 87 who signed up to speak with you all back on April 9th, and here I am again to share a few thoughts as a concerned mother, voter, and citizen of Knox County. I wore my green shirt last time as a show of support for the proposed cuts to the magnet funds, and I'm back tonight in the same green shirt because I'm still opposed to your proposed cuts to our inner city magnet program funds. In my previous comments, I shared with you all that I believe there's no such thing as someone else's child. I encouraged you all to get creative, and I implored you to think outside the box. So when I looked at this revised budget, I'm struck by a few things. First, the solutions don't seem too creative. From my assessment, you're still gutting the magnet program. You're fostering a sense of competition among your most under-resourced communities in the district. The optics surrounding the previous proposed budget were horrific. The optics now, guys, they're not any better. The lack of transparency is astonishing. There is no clear information about how the more limited magnet funds will be distributed or how the competitive dollars will be made available. There is a tiny line of text on the bottom of the Excel spreadsheet on the budget on the magnet page that indicates exactly 3 schools eligible for magnet funding. I'm a little confused by that. I hope someone's going to speak to that to clarify that part for us. Frankly, I'm very disappointed with this proposal. I believe our teachers and administrators deserve better, and I believe our students deserve better. Here's an idea that's both creative and outside of the box. Institute a community impact assessment fee that every developer in the county would be charged as they build new housing units. These impact assessment dollars could cover funds for roads and sidewalks and for schools. As an inner city resident, you ask us to bear the burden of these new suburban schools when we not only have aging buildings, but also we have vital programs that are being cut. It's not fair, it is not equitable, and it is not just. If schools are becoming overcrowded because new subdivisions are being built in the suburbs, ask the ones making the money as a result of these developments to pour back into our community. Many business owners, I believe, want to do well for themselves and do well for the community. While that's just one creative idea, here's the thing. It's your job as our school board to come up with equitable, creative solutions to the problems faced by our schools in the county. So for the remainder of my remarks, I want to speak to the teachers and the administrators in the House. Let me start by saying that I see you. I see what is asked of you. I see how the county is cutting your funding right out from under you. I see your resources being stripped, and I see the precious faces of the children that you care for. Last week, when I spent a couple of hours volunteering at Beaumont, I saw how all the teachers had their clean, dry Beaumont t-shirts ready, available in the classroom on testing days because they knew their students were showing up wet. It was a rainy week last week. I promise to keep showing up and to advocating for and with you. And to the parents and the families in the room, I want to extend a challenge to you. If there's a PTA meeting notification, show up. If there's a volunteer opportunity and your schedule allows, sign up. And when the school comes to you with a plea to set up a foundation, step up. There's no such thing as someone else's children.
Cheryl.
Are we stating our name and address? Cheryl Burchett. I'm a parent of a Beaumont student, 2 Beaumont students now, and I also teach there. A few weeks ago, a record number of parents, teachers, and supporters of magnet schools, Project Grad, and GT programs came out and overwhelmingly spoke about the importance of these programs, particularly for our most vulnerable students who were disproportionately affected by the proposed cuts. I rejoiced when the vote was delayed. I prayed that these few weeks would be spent to find additional sources of revenue, or, barring that, better, more fair solutions could be proposed so that the burden of these budget issues would not land squarely on the shoulders of our inner city low-income students. So, here we are. And what has changed? The passion that we felt for GT, Magnet, and Project Grad has not. I assure you of this. The only explanation that I have for the smaller number of people here to speak tonight, I wish we were here till midnight speaking, but I think that speaks to what this process has been. In these 2 weeks, there have been no community meetings to brainstorm for solutions. If there have been meetings and conversations with County Commission, I don't know about them as a parent or a Knox County employee, either because they have not happened or because this process has not been transparent. That's not really new for this budget situation, but at least with the first budget proposal, we got a full week to look at and digest what was being proposed, to figure out what we needed to say to you about the importance of our programs. I'm thankful that $2 million was found, but getting an 84-page budget on a Friday and having the meeting to talk about it on Monday and needing to sign up by noon when you're a working parent is extremely difficult. So those of us that made the effort to be here are here speaking for many people who couldn't be. I spent my planning period today looking at the 84-page budget proposal on my school computer because it's the end of the school year, and I don't know many schools that can afford to print 84 pages of color copies at their school. And I was very disheartened to see that not much has changed. We are still fostering these budget cuts on the back of the lowest income students in Knox County. Project Grad is getting decimated 50% of its budget cut. I'm glad there's been an agreement reached about that, but I don't feel like celebrating a 50% cut. Magnet's got it even worse. We're looking at a 63% cut across the board, and that's if the cuts are equitably distributed, which at this point, no one even understands fully what the cuts are or how they'll be decided upon. So there's no telling about that. And GT, I'm glad that they've renewed some of the positions that were going to be lost, but my understanding is now that's only going to the top 10% across the county, which again will disproportionately affect our lower income students in these more affected schools. I am urging you to let's continue this trend of not much has changed. 3 weeks ago, you couldn't vote for the budget. You decided to postpone. I'm going to ask you to continue that. We can't vote for this budget. I understand we're up against some kind of a deadline. I don't know what happens if we don't have a budget tomorrow. Let's find out. Let's find some better solutions. It's end of days, guys. Let's be the change for these students.
if we pass this budget, then nothing has changed, and we're back to where we were. And I guarantee you, all of those families that were here last time and then some will know about it and will be looking to you guys and telling you what they feel about it. Thank you.
Ellis. After April is Todd Shelton and then Gwen McKenzie.
So I'm the parent of a Beaumont student not in the honors program, and I'm speaking tonight on the statements that are in the memo about magnet programs still being cut based on the REA evaluations. At the meeting earlier this month, I assumed there had been a misunderstanding of the purpose of magnet programs and that surely the information shared by the community during the meeting would clarify that. But by citing the evals as reason to reduce funding, it shows that you are still not addressing what the magnet programs are for. In 1989, the NAACP had the Office of Civil Rights implement magnet programs into Knox County schools. The purpose of these programs were to desegregate inner city schools and give the black students an opportunity to engage in extracurricular activities. In the early 90s, the Board of Education sued the Knox County Commission to fund these programs, which, current board, you might want to consider. Since the inception of our magnet schools, there's been a struggle to fund and implement them. Again, and since the inception, their purpose has never been about test results. So why are we referencing these tests as a reason to end the program? About the REA evals, they are insufficient according to current research on evaluating magnet programs. I've read the REA memo, and it focuses exclusively on test results and enrollment. Please listen to this quote from the Journal of School Choice. It is vital that researchers not overlook this original goal of magnet schools as desegregation mechanisms when assessing their effectiveness and consider how school-specific themes and objectives relate to these non-academic outcomes. Ideally, then, several measures should be employed in order to assess magnet schools across a range of subject areas and to examine their potential non-academic benefits compared to other schooling options. Or this quote from the Journal of Education for Students Placed at Risk. Educators must dig deeper to understand how students are performing within schools individually and collectively, especially students who are underachieving, and what components of these magnet programs will improve their achievement and reduce achievement gaps. Notice that neither of these recommend using testing and enrollment as a sign of effectiveness. This isn't my job to research this information, but it is yours. And I'm finding that the REA eval should not be used incorrectly to gauge the effectiveness of these programs. If you're concerned about the literacy levels of magnet schools, then do something about it. And I mean really dive in to learn how to better address the poverty and instability of the children at these schools. Spend time with their communities to learn what they need. You can't teach a hungry child. And I know that so many of you before me today care deeply about the students, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But as far as I can tell, none of you have lived the experience as a money-poor child in a segregated neighborhood. And none of you seem to know firsthand the holistic benefits of magnet programs. Don't scapegoat these test scores because you're unwilling to fight for a thorough assessment that measures the true effectiveness of these magnet programs. The current recommendation to cull 2 magnet programs and force magnet schools to compete for resources is setting the entire magnet system up to fail. Schools serving the most vulnerable students should feel supported, not fearful that they'll be the next in line on the budget cuts. And schools serving the most vulnerable students should be unified in supporting each other, not facing a dog-eat-dog competition for funding. Also, what happens when you defund these programs? What are the effects of resegregating our schools? Not once has that been discussed in these proposed budgets. I understand taking money back from the magnet programs makes your life easier by smoothing out the budget, but what does it do to the students? You may claim these decisions as fiscal responsibility, but what about moral responsibility? If afterwards you realize that culling the magnet programs was a mistake, how are you going to re-implement them? This process has not been transparent. We have heard glowing reviews for GMA programming, and then we've heard they're subpar. We've heard that Sarah Moore Green and Green Magnet Academy are lacking in literacy scores, yet the TVAS scores on the Tennessee State Report Card are 4 and 5 respectively. So why are we culling programs that are showing student growth in this area is higher than those across the state? Isn't that exceptional? considering students at these schools face extraordinary hurdles in academic success. The insinuation that magnet programs are failing their purpose is to revise their history and discount the struggles of inner city families. It minimizes the continued community segregation in Knoxville. It minimizes the well-researched educational impacts due to segregation. It minimizes the continued fight against systemic racism in Knoxville. Feigning colorblindness as a reaction to test scores does not make these budget cuts anything less than what they are, a direct assault to Black and brown communities.
Shelton. And then after Todd is Gwen McKenzie.
Well, I want to thank all of you for your work and your public service. And I think most people here know that you work hard. And just like on the 11th of April, I am just really impressed and humbled by the people here and the speaking and the information and the knowledge sharing that has gone on. And it's got to restore a lot of faith, even though we're in a tough spot here, because there are answers out here. I have been in Knoxville, South Knox County for, I guess, a little over 40 years. And my kids grew up and went to the public schools there. And my wife and I both were pretty involved. And all the way through with the parent-teacher programs and whatnot. And because we like education and we like seeing kids learn. I regret I didn't spend more time looking around and seeing how other kids were doing. And I was focused mainly on mine. But it's never too late. A lot of bad things have happened that have come about from this budget. But I've been learning, even at my late age, that there are, when bad news comes and bad things happen, there are bad takeaways for sure, and there's some good takeaways. And that's how we go forward. The bad takeaway, you don't want to hear them again, but you will. And that is that we have a well-acclaimed program like Project Grad that was almost ended, and we have a new school built that in no way met any of the population criteria for an additional school. That school serves mainly middle-class folks who look like me. And Project Grad mainly serves mostly people who don't look like me. And that's bad news. I am here tonight because folks like me and like y'all, need to stand up for equity and equality in our institutions, and starting with our schools. About the need for Project Grad is in dispute. However, for me, when the kind of support that was shown on April the 11th makes itself heard from so many different folks, then skeptics of the program need to re-examine their evaluations. The magnet program, more bad takeaway is that our magnet programs are threatened in needed areas, and they are going to still be threatened with this new budget. We have school teachers and non-teaching positions who are underpaid, and they will still be underpaid after tonight. We have classrooms far too large to expect the delivery of a good education to our students, and they will be that way tomorrow. We have a critical need for specialized positions, many more of them, like social workers, nurses, specialty course teachers, behavioral consultants, mediators, and those needs, they will remain after we go home today. We have entire programs like Project Grad, magnet school programs, restorative practice trainings, cultural competency trainings, and STEM school programs, community school programs, and they will still be short funded tomorrow. Now, the good takeaway after all that, we have to look for it, it's there. We have people in our communities who care about their schools, and they are finding out that when they organize together and speak up, things can change. And that's important. I think we have a school board who is beginning to think about sending a budget to the county that needs to be funded instead of a budget that works with what little money we are given. We have board members and candidates who are on record agreeing that the school system has gone unfunded for 20 years, and this has to change.
Your time is up, Mr. Shelton.
Thank you.
Gwen McKenzie, and then after Gwen is Laura Burgard and Lauren Hobson.
Thank you, Gwen McKenzie, Knox County resident. Thank you for everyone that spoke before me, because you took away most of the points that I was going to make, so I will not have to take up the entire time. I also want to thank the school board members that were able to find the time to return my phone calls. I certainly appreciate that. For those of you that did not get an opportunity, I know that you all have been extremely busy, but I felt compelled to speak today to the entire board to just let you guys know what the message that is out here in the community and that has been sent to our entire city as a result of the school board's recommendation to eliminate or suspend programs that support students of color and low-income students at our inner city schools. Whether this message is intentional or not, the message that is actually the perception currently is that our school board lacks empathy and lacks sensitivity to all students, especially students of color and our most vulnerable students in our school system. When I first heard the decision and the recommendation to eliminate Project Grad and to suspend the funding for the magnet programs at Green and Saremore Green, I was like most people. I was definitely in a state of disbelief initially that you did not recognize the value that these programs provide to these students. It took hundreds of students, parents, and educators to attend the meeting, and I'm so thankful that everyone took the time to do so, to share their experiences and the impact that Project Grad had on the lives of these students and the Magnet School program and how it's enriching the lives of these children that otherwise would not have the opportunity to experience some of the things that the magnet schools provide to our students. Again, I'm glad that someone has already spoke about the beginning of when the magnet programs were first instituted, what they were meant to do, and they were not STEM related whatsoever. So thank you for someone who's already talked about that. So when we talk about the results of the magnet programs, we definitely cannot, it's not fair to talk about those STEM-related areas because these were not what these magnet programs were designed to do and they don't do today. However, I did feel that it was very interesting when we had a teacher that read a letter that was praising the magnet program at Green School as being exemplary, that was written by the superintendent, and then to hear that these programs were not valued anymore and were looking at being suspended. I do not feel that making the schools compete for magnet funding is the answer. If you want to decrease disparities, you don't do it by eliminating programs that have this type of value and enrichment in the lives of our students. The message that we need from this board is that you do care about all students, and I certainly believe that you do, and that you are sensitive to the needs of all students, especially students of color and disadvantaged students in our inner city schools. And I ask that you would reconsider and that you would fully fund Project Grad as well as our magnet school programs and not have them compete for funding. Thank you.
Laura.
Good evening. My name's Laura Burgard, and I'm a GT instructional coach serving Inskip, Fountain City, A.L. Lots, Moreland Heights, and South Knox. 2 weeks ago, many of my colleagues, parents, and GT students came to represent our #1 priority, which is the advanced students in our county. They spoke about how critical our programming is, and they were heard. Action was taken, and we're thrilled to see that the service to students has been included in this new proposal. However, there are some critical issues that still remain and must be addressed. We spoke for our students, and now we have to speak for ourselves. Not one time this year, in the midst of huge hits to our staffing in our department, have we been advocates for ourselves. We've continued to advocate for our students, which it should be that way. Tonight, I want you to hear us advocate for ourselves. We know that they will be receiving instructions that they deserve, but it's time to consider the people behind this instruction, the people that provide it, us. This proposal directly impacts our programming. First of all, 10 GT teachers are listed in the superintendent's memo, but in the budget on page 39, there are only 6 listed. Where are the other 4 positions? Where are they? We want to make sure that we have them listed under our programming. Forgive me for being wary of this detail, but given what our department's been surprised with this year, I am. The 4 positions should not be moved after approval. They should be listed under the correct programming before to ensure they're not going to be used somewhere else. We don't need any more surprises. Second, obtaining gifted endorsements are part of the proposal, but no funding at all is listed in the budget anywhere. Where is that funding if we are to be expected to get an endorsement? And this requirement brings up direct contradiction to the line stating content areas will create resources to be used. Why are we going to be endorsed if we're not continuing to create the valuable advanced resources that we, the GT instructors, are teaching in our classrooms? Content area coaches and GT coaches are different. One would assume that's why the gifted endorsements would be required. Please consider content area doing the vetting of resources and allow us to continue our standard aligned curriculum-based lessons focused on the needs of extending the curriculum being taught in classrooms to our students. This is where our knowledge and expertise lies. Leave it to us to do that, please. Third, the proposal calls for a name change from GT to Advanced Academic Resource Teachers, ART. This change will not only cause confusion, we've been tagged, we've been GT, now we're ART. Please don't do that. It's going to be inevitable pushback from all of our stakeholders. We don't need that. You've heard a lot of it already. If we must be listed as teachers and not coaches, let us be GT teachers to avoid the confusion. Students and parents are already familiar with that title. Why are we changing it? Lastly, Dr. Reiswick has referred to us as highly effective, high-achieving educators. It's who we are. We do what it takes to serve our students. That's what we do. That's what we love. Knowing this, there will be significantly more travel for 10 educators to cover all of our schools across the county, and that was handled earlier by 20 coaches. We are going to be cut to 10 when you tell us where the other 4 positions are. We ask you to take action to provide for us a supplement to offset the personal cost of travel that we'll be doing to serve all of our kids, which we will do because that's who we are. We need additional supplement to be able to travel to meet the needs of all the students across the large county. Everyone in this room is aware that in times of budget crises, dramatic steps are required. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I am saying is that when you cut programming from a program that's working and is obviously valued by principals, students, and parents, it's short-sighted. When adjustments are only made when there's a public outcry to appease, it's short-sighted. This is evident by the reactions from principals who we work with every day, who were informed and completely surprised 2 days before the November break with proposed cuts in their service. They rose up in protest. The solution was to put a Band-Aid on the issue for 6 months in order to appease. Next, parents were completely surprised to hear of the planned changes to their students' instruction. They rose up in protest. Within 24 hours, we had 22 people come. You once again put a Band-Aid on the program to appease these voices. Changing our department's blended programming will only lock us into 100%, one of the 4 proven instructional strategy and models that we have placed in schools. Please hear us and please look, and I am
Laura.
sad of the lack of transparency.
Your
Thanks.
time is up. Thank you. Lauren Hobson. And then after Lauren, Tanya Coates and Nikki Petty.
Lauren Hobson, Knox County. The first 2 comments I want to make really have nothing to do with the point of what I'm going to say tonight, but I think they're important anyway. I know that proficiency scores have been brought up both by members of the board and by members of the audience. But being that proficiency, if you don't know this, you need to. Proficiency is an arbitrary number. And in light of our last 3 years of testing debacles, test scores should not come into play in any argument on any side of the issue, ever. The other brief statement I wanted to make is about the title of TAG. For me, I'm perfectly fine with it being changed. I'm not sure to what. When I started teaching in Knox County 17 years ago, and I had 3rd grade students that left my room once a week for TAG, my other children would ask me where they were going. And I would say, well, they're going to TAG. And they would say, Ms. Hobson, what does that mean? And I don't remember what I made up because I didn't want to tell them they're going to the talented and gifted program because all my students are talented and gifted in some way. And so for me, GAT is not really better. It kind of sounds like a fur ball. Sorry. I do want to recognize, though, I appreciate the efforts of our board members that did talk to state officials and county officials during the last several weeks. I know that not all of your efforts were public, but I know they did happen. But I do have to say that when I read the memo today, I was disappointed because even though there were statements regarding putting some funding back into magnet schools or TAG or Project Grad, the one thing that was glaringly absent was money for teacher raises. Last year when this came up, when KCA came to the board with our MOU to be ratified, one of the board members stated that they didn't want their hands to be tied to having to provide a certain amount of money for teachers every year. In my opinion, they need to be tied. Our MOU with KCA has not been met fully any of the 4 years it has been in existence. And I'm going to repeat these figures, and I'm sorry that they are slightly out of date because the Tennessee Education Association does not have the most current data up on their website. But from last year, Knox County is 3rd in fiscal capacity. That means 3rd in their capacity to fund public education. As of last year, we were 39th in average teacher pay in Tennessee. Not just were we 39th in average teacher pay, we were 18th just in East Tennessee. That means in school systems just from the plateau over, we were 18th. I'm one of those teachers that is counting the seconds to payday. I'm really happy on the 25th of every month, and by the 30th, I'm counting the seconds again. You know, and this is a personal story between my student loans, between, you know, debt incurred from a divorce, between, you know, potentially selling a kidney to keep my kid in band every year. Our teachers are simply not paid enough, and we have got to do something about it. You know, the strikes that are coming across the nation have not just been about teacher pay. In fact, they have been about fully funding programs for our students as well. I can't advocate for a strike, but some of you up there know in my heart I want to. In fact, I really want to be in Colorado where they're threatening to arrest teachers and put them in jail for striking, because if you want to see a community rise up, put their teachers in jail. We need the community support. We need the support of school boards and superintendents to fund our school system. That's how these actions by teachers have worked in other states. Give our mayor and our county commission a chance to be the hero. I know the mayor really wants to be Bigfoot in a cape. I know Commissioner Wright really needs a superhero cape to go with all his snazzy ties. Election day is tomorrow, and by this time next year, people won't remember that their taxes went up a few pennies, but they will see the positive changes in our school system that could be made when we demand more money from our community. Thank you.
Tanya Coates, Knox County, KCA president. Like minds think alike, right? From one to the next. Thanks, Lauren. But here I'm speaking on behalf of the Knox County Education Association and the educators of Knox County. See, we try never to be adversarial with the board, and I think we've tried to do that on a regular basis. We hardly ever tried to miss an opportunity of collaboration. I think we've extended our hand almost every time. We would be remiss if we didn't speak up for educators across Knox County. But we, the educators of Knox County, are here. When we came here a couple of weeks ago, we were in solidarity with the students, parents, and the community stakeholders. Not once did we demand or even bring up that commitment you made to us. And I know this is tough, because it's tough to sit there and think that you have the funding. One would beg to differ that you just forgot about us, but you were reminded by one of your own. Ms. Lynn Fugate said, we have a commitment to our teachers of an MOU. Now, I know that we said that when we signed that agreement earlier this year, that when it comes to the fight about the budget, who's going to stand up with you? These people in this room are standing up with you. Again, if you want us to stand with you and not be adversarial, we, the educators, asking you to just think about these concerns, pondering concerns that we go over in our head when you want us to follow the following goals. To close achievement gaps. How can we do this when we don't have the proper funding? How can we eliminate disparities in education when we're fostering differences, again, to provide the unnecessary resources that we don't have for communities? And thirdly, how can we build positive relationships when we pit students against educators or educators against communities? We have got to think differently. And I want to leave you with this, and this is a true story. You know, 15 years ago, I was in a hard situation. I had a third child by the name of an ex-husband that left me about $75,000 in debt. And I kept thinking to myself, how am I going to put my kids through school? And they went through Knox County Public Schools. I had to think, I had to ask people, can you help me here? Can you help me there? But I went to the Knoxville Teachers Federal Credit Union and said, I need some help. I can't do this by myself. And they said, well, what do you need? And they gave me a loan to help pay off my debt, that I'm debt-free. So if you don't go and ask the county commission for the money that you need, they will never know how much you really need until you ask for it. So I'm asking, I'm begging you, and I'm begging you, because I know Lynn said it, I know Gloria said it, I'm asking you to go and beg, because if they don't do it, I know this community that's behind us today, they will come to your stead and speak up and fight for the money that their kids deserve. And we're asking you to speak up for us. So I'm asking you today, prioritize, 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 and humble yourselves just to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Nikki Petty. after Nikki is Josh Martinez and Rebecca Loy.
My name is Nikki Petty, 2107 Jefferson Avenue. I wanted to share with you today about what I've seen as a transfer parent and a business owner who hosts the STEAM studies at Green Magnet, about what I've seen these past 2 years. As of August 2016, Green Magnet Academy lost their pre-K programming to Spring Hill, has had 2 principals, and saw a large turnover of teachers. I would even add the loss of the Leadership Academy that both of our excellent principals of color attended. I've also seen an improvement and increase in STEAM programming, STEAM-related partners. I've seen a new principal commit to staying till she retires. New highly qualified teachers take the place of old ones, and a continued commitment to have high expectations for students, an emphasis on the pride they have for being at Green Magnet Academy. As a transfer parent, I had hopes that mine and my friends, new and old, involvement with Green would look very similar to many other friends who attend Beaumont. I felt sick as each of them called me this week to say they received their letter saying your transfer request cannot be honored to Green Magnet Academy. I don't believe we are more important or capable than zone parents. I don't believe that, but I do know the resources that we bring. And I've watched for years how my friends at Beaumont have poured into their school. And we hope to do the same with Green Magnet Academy. Our reasons for transfer to Green included as our #1 choice. It is not a school within a school. It's the closest to our houses and our businesses. We strongly believe in hands-on project-based learning. A number of us own businesses that could desperately use more employees who are exposed to STEM education at a younger age. We have no desire to take part in the de facto segregation that school zoning in Knoxville has created. And we have a deep belief and conviction that our lives must be entangled in a way with others from different socioeconomic backgrounds than we are, so we are affected by the same circumstances in each other's lives, for better or for worse. Green Magnet was our #1 choice. Over the past few weeks, I cannot express how truly important this has been in my life. Honestly, I'm not accustomed to having entire programs promised to my children taken away and given a week's notice to a major change in their school. But I've been comforted by those who have. A cut so drastic to a school that it changed the very wording of its name, Green Magnet Academy. And to be honest, it's a little bit of a shot to the heart every time I see Green Math and Science Academy. It's on our signs, it's in your budget. The name is Green Magnet Academy. Parents, teachers, administration, students should have been invited and should have been able to voice how they feel, how important their education is to them, and how it works for them. I can't imagine how it's going to feel if you choose not to vote ride funding at Green Magnet to the 8-year-old and 9-year-old who has gone to Green Magnet their whole life. It's had technology lab, robotics club, design lab, have been told they're little engineers, and it's all taken away from them. It is not okay. We should have been asked. We should have been a part of this decision. This should have been a participatory process. It is demoralizing to children. And to me, it has to be an unimaginable reality to how they feel that people must think of them and how much they care. I know it's difficult to see the recent proposals in light of many decisions in a long history of Knoxville. I grew up in Knoxville. I went to Powell. But my dad taught at Ruhl. And I still remember the fight for Ruhl. I still talk to people who talk about the loss of Ruhl. And I just feel like this is another opportunity that the Board of Education could take to listen to the community and to listen to how what they're going to vote for, or you all are going to vote for, is going to affect their lives and their community. There's been no consistency, it feels like, in the stated goals of Knox County schools. If the district is so concerned about literacy, why did you take away our pre-K program? My son was there last year. I had friends who were on the waiting list for the program, and they were told repeatedly that it was at full capacity. I saw it myself. Yet it was moved to a non-priority school. The community, and to my knowledge, teachers, administration is never asked how they feel every day that they see all of the children who are trying to learn. They were never asked how to increase the reading skills. Shirley,
Miss
thank you
Petty,
very
your
much.
time is up. Thank you. Osh Martinez. Rebecca Loy is after Josh, and then Tiffany Nicely.
Hi, my name is Josh Martinez, and I'm coming to you today on the subject of the budget cuts. I am in gifted and talented, but I'd also like to bring up the magnet school funding competition. It's just really not right for magnet schools to have to. It's really not right for them to have to compete for money. I don't understand how that's fair at all. It's not like it's a race or competition, or it shouldn't be a race or competition. And it's very strange to me how money is being taken out of Sarah Moore Green and going to Emerald Charter Schools. Is it because Green and Sarah Moore Green students are less than the students at Emerald, or is it that Sarah Moore Green and Green just don't matter as much as Emerald? That's a question I have. Also, I'm quite concerned about the cuts for gifted. I am very glad that you saved the pullout groups, but we still need more coaches for all the schools we have in Knox County schools. And it's also good for the coaches to train the teachers too. So if we are going to talk about gifted today, we should be talking about how to fund it more, not to how to fund it less. Gifted is a very good program for students. It's for higher thinking. It's for higher level thinking people, but it's also for people that just are very bored in regular classes. Magnet schools need to be funded more. Project Grad needs to be funded more. GT needs to be funded more. All these programs are for higher level thinking kids, and they help people and students make new ideas to help the community. And I think it's really good to have new ideas in the community, so we don't need to be shutting down a canal of good ideas. Thank you for your time today, and I hope you reconsider your decision about taking the money from magnet schools to charter schools, taking the money from gifted to charter schools, and taking the money from Project Grad to charter schools. Thank you very much.
Becca. Rebecca.
My name is Rebecca Loy, 1701 Jefferson Avenue. I grew up in Knoxville. I graduated from Farragut High School, and my 4 children went to Bearden. And all those schools, because I was at Farragut, there was an honors program at Bearden that had tons of AP classes. All of our kids graduated with a lot of college credit already because of that. They were wonderful educators. 10 years ago, my husband and I moved to East Knoxville, and that has been a really wonderful experience and very eye-opening, because when you live in West Knoxville, you hear stories and things that when you move over here and you live here, you realize those are really not true. And so I've also volunteered for several years at Spring Hill, which is not in my actual school zone district, because my neighborhood, in the wisdom of somebody, is zoned for 3 different elementary schools, and none of those is the one closest to us, which is Green Elementary. So that's very bizarre. But as we have moved and watched, what has happened over the last 10 years is now you'll notice people are no longer afraid to come downtown. If you've tried to get a parking place, there are none. And they also are not afraid of East Knoxville anymore because they're moving there. There are more and more people in my neighborhood that look like me now. And so what is ironic is that given that the magnet programs exist because of integration of the schools, it seems like a really good opportunity to continue toward that goal is really being shot down by shutting down this program, which in a lot of cases is going to end up with less money for you because those parents are going to put their kids in private schools or homeschool them. So this seems really not to be furthering toward anyone's goal because we are actually talking about dollars here. I've also seen, working at Spring Hill, the amazing work that Project Grad does and the way that they just really help those very young kids. The things they bring to them, the help they give them, the mentoring, and even the reaching out with food, with the backpacks. Pete, you've heard all the programs. So many more people have talked about them. These two programs, to me, are so important to these schools. Go back to Knox County. I know you have this MOU that says you can't ask for more money to staff these schools that were built. Don't go back and ask for money to staff those schools. Go back and ask for money for Project Grad and for the magnet programs because they really are necessary. Thank you. I know you've got a horrible decision to make. I thank you so much for listening to everybody, though.
Tiffany?
Tiffany Nicely, Knox County. Since 2011, it's been my job to continually advocate for the advanced learners in our district. Therefore, I'm using this platform to inform you of some truths about the latest budget proposal and how it affects our students. This new plan outlines that we move from instructional coaches to teachers and that our time should be solely spent in direct small group instruction with students. This is a win. We need that time with our students. We want that time with our students. But this means no co-teaching with teachers to build any kind of capacity for how to enrich these children at any other point of the school week. Our students are at school 35 hours a week. So what about the other 34 and a half hours they spend during the week? Who's going to be responsible for providing the best strategies for meeting the needs of those advanced students? Because frankly, those classroom teachers have enough on their plates to worry about the thousands of other jobs to worry and add this to their plate as well. No co-teaching with this new model, no creation of any advanced resources. We've been creating our own resources for years that are standards-based, aligned to our curriculum, and we've been creating resources for teachers to use in the classroom for their Tier 1 instruction. Now it is no one's job to do this. We will have no professional development, no co-planning, and none of the other supports we've provided in numerous schools. This plan reverts us back to what we changed in 2009. We changed it based on research of what was told and what was shown to us, and I have countless buckets of information to support it, that this was not what was best for advanced learners. We've been here before. This one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. Why can't we learn from the past rather than repeating it? The newest proposal indicates that KCS will start using a screener to determine who should receive GT services in the future. Where is the funding for that in the budget? Furthermore, you may have heard an argument that without a screener, some GT students right now are over-identified in this county. Far more of a problem is the statistical truth across the country that our minority populations are far underserved in GT, and they need more opportunities for enrichment support. Tennessee happens to be the pilot state for 50 of its teachers taking a micro-credential course online to become educated in how to better support and identify these minority students, most of which are found in our inner city schools. Yet one of the largest counties in our state is going in the opposite direction from our own state by supporting GT students' needs less. This new plan outlines a name change for GT Instructional Coach to ARCH, Advanced Academic Resource Teachers. So I did some research on that term, wondering about its origin. I found it in Metro Nashville Public Schools. It's my belief that KCS wants to pay us less money as instructional coaches and take away those coaching responsibilities under the guise of it's working in Nashville or Nashville does it. Why is it working in Nashville? Here's what an ARC provides in Nashville. I'm happy to pass these around what I'll be reading from. You guys have those to look at on your own. But in Nashville, they provide differentiated lessons for pre-kindergarten through 8th grade. They do within-class groupings for pre-K through 8. They do push-in groups. They do co-teaching classes for K through 8. They have specific advanced thinking lessons taught by the art teachers. Their personalized learning time enrichment classes. They do cluster grouping, all for K through 8. They do curriculum compacting and replacement curriculum for K through 8. And they do weekly pull-out classes for K through 8. They do contests, clubs, and organizations for gifted individuals. They do individual subject level acceleration and more. How do they serve? Because every art serves no more than 2 schools. So every school gets served by a half-time art teacher. Many schools are also given the option to increase their art to full-time with school-based funding. So as you can see, these art teachers provide many of the same supports and more than what we've provided in this county for years. We've been doing this. We've been doing it since 2010, but we want all of that go away to remain with one piece that we want the 10 remaining educators, whatever you want to call us, and you want us to serve the 50 elementary schools. For the record, I'm much less concerned about what my title is. I'm much more concerned about the loss of this support for our schools, our teachers, and our students. For our advanced students are not advanced just 30 minutes per week.
That concludes public forum.
Okay, board members, we have 2 other items on the agenda, but with your permission, we'll take a recess until 6:50, if that's okay with the board. Any objections? Okay, we'll reconvene at 6:50. Thank you. Omitted one city council member earlier. I did not see her in the audience, so I wanted to make sure we recognized Lauren Ryder is here or was here. So anyway, wanted to recognize that. And now I will turn to Ms. Coatney.
Item 6, approve fiscal year 2019 Knox County Board of Education general purpose budget at the major category level for $484,530,000.
Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Roundtree. Superintendent Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just to summarize what's taken place in the last couple of weeks, and again, appreciate the board and your wisdom in terms of putting off the vote at our last meeting on April the 11th. Since that point in time, the basic education program formula April estimate came in. We've looked at that very closely and done some analyzing there. Let me remind you that is the April estimate. There's also a May estimate, a June estimate, and a July final. So it is a fluid model, so it could change some from what we have, but at least this represents an official estimate. It was about $1.9 million higher than what we had projected. There were a couple of dynamics going on within the formula that make that happen. One is that Knox County, the fiscal capacity actually decreased slightly, which made us receive a little bit more in terms of percentage-wise of state funding because fiscal capacity decreased by a small amount. Also, there was a reduction in some at-risk funding, about $500,000. We're continuing to look at those numbers and the direct certification. And then there was a slight increase in student transportation, about $289,000. And then there is a possibility that our CTE enrollment is overstated a little bit. So and again, we're trying to work through those numbers with the state, so it could impact funding and the number of CTE teachers that we earn through the formula. Just like to say too, thank you to our legislators and thank you to Governor Haslam. The BEP has been pretty generous. Maybe none of us like the formula, but since 2016, if you look at all the additional revenue that Knox County has received, $37 million of it has been through the basic education program formula, and then locally about $9.5 million. So 80% of the dollars that we've received over the last few years have been generated through the basic education program formula. So thank you to the governor and legislators for putting the money and the resources into education. So once you look at the $1.9 million, we did have an adjustment to our local funding. Mr. Caldwell was here earlier, and I don't know if any board members want to ask him, but let me just say before Chris is called on, that I know we look at the value of a penny and how much a penny on the property tax brings in, and I think the amount that was projected was a little bit over aggressive in terms of looking at what the value of a penny brings in on the property tax. So we had to back down on our property tax estimate about $500,000, and I don't know if that explanation is clear enough, or do we want Chris to address that? Okay, I think Chris, if you don't mind.
Mr. Caldwell, yeah.
Good afternoon. Basically, what happened is we looked at our estimates with Gary and Joe, as we did in February. We thought we would hit our budget estimate in FY18 on the penny on the tax rate, which is $1,132,000. After we got the collections of February and March in, March collections were down 16% compared to the previous year. So we do not think we will hit budget on property tax for FY18. Will be about $5,000 per penny short. And so that led us to also lower the projection for 19. And that was what led to the reduction in property tax across the board, not only for schools, but for general fund and for debt service.
Chris, Madam Chair, may I ask a
Go ahead,
question?
Ms. Etheridge.
Okay, Chris, being in real estate, I know the first quarter was down, and that was the house projections, house been sold, but I also know that supply is now more than, demand is now more than supply. And with the market, and so looking at the second quarter, having talked to the title company, mortgage company I work with, it's back up. So it was down the first quarter. It's back up now, which means that it could continue to go up. And so I think cutting it $500,000 might be a little early to say that.
Well, the tax roll is already set, so you get in what you get in. We know the percentage is always about 96% of that tax roll. We did put in growth for FY19 of 1.5%, and so that is the average growth that we have saw historically for the last 10 years. So while the revenue estimates may grow, I don't foresee a big change in the property tax roll. We always, I don't think the problem is we're not going to, I'll stop if you want me to. I think we're not going to hit our estimate this year, and Joe may correct me, I don't remember the last time we didn't hit our estimate in property tax. It's been a few years, and so we pushed last year really hard, and this is a push too. I think if you were to put me and Joe in a room and say, are you comfortable with property tax, we both say no. We have saw a consistent decrease in the collections of delinquent property taxes. Now, I will tell you the reason for that is because our collections of current continue to increase. So that limits the amount that we see on delinquents. We'll eventually hit that floor. We've just not hit that floor yet. And that is definitely an issue. And so while if you just look at current taxes, you'll see growth every year, and it looks really good. But we're seeing a decrease of the collections as it relates to delinquents, which offsets some of that growth in current.
So when you did that estimate, you used numbers. How did you get that 100,000 before? Was it just a hope, wish that we would?
No, I wish. No, there's no hope. So what we basically do is we really thought, as we looked at FY19 before we even got all of February, we thought we would hit budget as it was relating to FY18 of $1,132,000 per penny. After we got February, I think we got a little concerned. We get March and we're like, okay, we're more than concerned. There's no way we're hitting. And so then we had to, we adjusted our estimate for what we thought we would end 18 with. So we got a different projection to end 18 and then used the same growth model for 19, but it just brought that penny down. And so, I'll tell you, it not only affects the school budget, it affects the county budget, it affects our debt service amount. So we're affected in two different ways. And so schools are affected in general operations and in debt service, so are we. And so it's unfortunate, but that's just kind of where we are. I think it would be unfair for us to sit here and project a number that we don't think is realistic. And once again, we did not talked about this. This is the first year of reappraisal. So the tax rate went from 232 down to 212. Now, you don't lose any money, and so contrary to what gets said, in the aggregate, it's the same, and so we don't lose money. So the penny on the tax rate went from $1,132,000 to $1,247,000. So that's an increase, but it's the same. So what happens is your pennies that you were getting go down. So you all went from 88 to 80. General fund went from 97 to 89, but the offset is in the amount per penny. But always that first year of the adjustment, there's a little sway because it's never exactly the same. So some funds gain, some funds lose, but as a whole, they're made whole, and we just go from there. So I'm not the bearer of good news. I just it's just the collection. Now, I will tell you this, and it's don't think that it's a bad thing. What I'm saying, the trustee's office collects like 96.25% in year one of property taxes. I mean, that's astounding. And over a 10-year period of that total tax roll, they'll collect 99.90%. I mean, it's unheard of. And so that collection rate, I would compare that against anybody in the state. The problem is the better you do in year one, which is what we're doing, then the delinquents, which were a lot higher, have came down.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Chris. I don't see any other lights on, so I assume there are no other questions for you, so I'll turn it back over to Superintendent Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Caldwell.
I'm sorry.
No, not for you.
Oh, no, okay. She didn't have a light on.
So after the two adjustments, the addition of 1.9 and subtraction of 500,000, $1.4 million left to put back into the budget in a way that we tried to put the money back. Let me just say 500,000 of it to Project Grad. I have to say thank you to Ronnie Chandler and also to Stephanie Wells in working with us and coming up with that number. I need to say too, it doesn't fund all of the expenses, but Project Grad has agreed to work with us this year and do some fundraising to make up the difference. I think the amount is actually somewhere around $700,000 for the cost of the services that Project Grad would be providing to us in our two two high schools. So again, appreciate both Ronnie and Stephanie for working with us. So that is part of the recommendation, $500,000. The contract, if it's a multi-year contract, would, based on what the board's done on other multi-year contracts, would come back to the board for approval in subsequent years. And again, just to know that if these same services are provided in a subsequent year, would cost $700,000. Also, in our efforts to, I know a lot of discussion about reading proficiency and literacy and so forth, to double down our efforts. And in 3 of our CUSP schools, and again, just remind the board that a CUSP school, priority CUSP school, is in the bottom 10% in the state, which once you fall into the 5%, the bottom 5%, then there's an opportunity for the state to come in and take over those schools. So part of what we're doing with this budget is to, again, focus on reading proficiency and literacy. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't want any schools in the bottom 10%, 20%, 30%, or 40%. It was made, the statement was made tonight, reading proficiency 40% across the district. Yes, that's right, and that's not good enough. The state says 75% reading proficiently by 3rd grade by the year 2025. We're at 40%. At CUSP schools, we're 11%. I can't sit here in this chair and ignore that. And I'm not. Now, so, the board understands, the board's going to do what the board's going to do, but I just feel like from my standpoint that the greatest disparity right now, one of the greatest disparities, is the lack of academic performance from some of our most at-risk schools. Then those children are not going to have a chance if they're not reading on grade level and reading proficiency. Don't even talk about college. A 21 is the minimum score in terms of the state saying a 21, you have the likelihood of being successful in a college entrance level course, making a C. I think a 75% chance making a C. I'm not sure, I may have that wrong. But just because you make a 21 is not going to ensure college and career. It's not just college. Some kids are not going to go to college. I get that. But also I get from people who want workers that they want them to be able to read, take direction, and understand what they read. Again, we've got discipline disparities we're trying to address, and we've got academic disparities we're trying to address. With graduation rates, two of our high schools below 80%. One of them dropped 9% last year in terms of graduation rate. So, if I don't try to address that, I'd fire myself.
Excuse me, point of order, out of order.
Okay.
If you'll wait, Superintendent.
If I may finish, please. If I may finish, please. Finish. So again, to double down our efforts with reading and literacy, about $500,000 of this budget is going towards that in 3 of our elementary schools. And I would like to say, too, from the standpoint, overall, we put about $6.8 million. If you look at the Project Grad schools, 14 schools, and when I say that, I'm not blaming Project Grad for anything, but when you look at those 14 schools, we put this budget puts about $6.8 million into those schools. Into those 14 schools, and it's roughly 88.5 positions. Now, when I say that, that's more so than what the staffing formula would provide that's for schools that are not in the economically disadvantaged category. In addition to that, $160,000 of magnet funding was cut to zero in the last presentation. It's $160,000. This time, that money has varied over the years. It's not always been $40,000. And I would like to say, too, that some of those schools have not even spent the $40,000 that was allocated. So again, the process to make it competitive was the fact that we want to be sure those monies are being utilized in a way that the students are going to benefit from them. And we felt like that control, if a proposal is submitted to us and it directly benefited the students, then it would be granted. So Dr. Reiswick and the C&I department would be overseeing those allocations or those proposals as they're submitted. Again, we heard on the talented and gifted, we heard how important the direct services to students was, and we put back, with a portion of the money, put back 2 of the GT coaches and look at changing the model a little bit to provide direct services to students. I mean, the breakdown right now, from what I was told, is okay, we spend about 40% of our time with students and 60% of our time coaching. So again, in looking at the model, more time, it's 2 more positions than what was in the other proposal, but more time spent with students in providing direct services, which is what I think we heard at the last meeting. Then, in addition to the budget that was recommended last time, the state board, and this happened in February, we should have caught it. We dropped the ball on this. We should have caught it before now, but the state board passed a regulation that an adult monitor must be placed on buses for transporting kids or students and children from 6 weeks old through pre-K. So we've estimated the cost of that at about $330,000 to provide a monitor on the buses, and I don't think there's any choice in that. So that pretty much, with all the adjustments we've made, gets us to where we are today with the recommended budget of $484,530,000. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Questions? We'll open it up for board discussion. Okay, Ms. Dethridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I listened to what the superintendent said, and I understand the predicament that we're in. But when you make statements like, my kids in District 1 can't read 11%, because we deal with kids, and we've had this literacy program. It didn't just start. It started about 2009. And I'm trying to figure out, we've had literacy coaches, we've had all the support in the schools, and you're saying they still can't read. So I'm trying to figure out, what is it that we're going to do differently? Because if you don't know why Johnny can't read, then you can't go in and fix Johnny. So I'm trying to figure out, what are we going to do different? Because I don't want to send in this extra support, and I'm not saying they don't need it, because we do need to make sure our kids can read. That's going to be a little different than what we've been doing, because I go to my schools. I see the kids reading. I see them being pulled out. They're being taught by TAs, and I've seen some janitors sit down with kids. I've seen a lot of people trying to help kids when they read. I'm sure the literacy coaches were back there trying to help them understand how to do that more effectively. So, and then another point, that's my first question. Second question is, are we addressing the kids that's coming into the district that can't even speak English? Because, see, they're coming in and they're being tested along with the kids that's been with us since kindergarten. And so I'm trying to figure out, are we pulling out those and trying to see if Johnny can read, but that the data that we're looking at, which can't, we keep not testing, or at least not saying that the data is correct. So I guess my question is, are we doing those 2 things to find out what's really going on before we submit additional resources in the schools?
Do you want to let Dr. Reiswick answer that? Okay, Dr. Reiswick, can you address Ms. Dethridge's questions, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Dethridge. It is a tough problem to try to figure out the best method for working on increasing reading proficiency. And I wish we could say there was a silver bullet for that. And if there were, we would have solved it by now. And I mean, obviously, this community wants to solve that as well. It really ends up becoming just a process that you have to continue with. And you're correct, we do have extra supports there, and these schools that we're talking about have received different funding from Title I federal funding. There are some grants we talked about in previous board meetings through iZone grants, through SIG grants that have been available to them. And so I think the hands-on focus to continue to keep that there that the superintendent's talking about as far as a reading facilitator who will work with students and also help with teachers. You mentioned they do have literacy level support people there at the building as well. We've assigned district teams. We started that about last December, where Ms. Julie Thompson, our executive director of elementary school, is now assigned to those schools, who has as good a turnaround record as anybody we have in elementary school, working and supporting that, as well as assigning our Janet Sexton, our reading supervisor, and math support. So we have a core team that's trying to come around. And lots of times in situations like this, and principals as well, when they've worked closely with them, the principals are the ones who lead that, and their staffs that are there, and really trying to work together to figure out how we're replicating services, sometimes how we're duplicating services, how are all the things aligning, how are Title I dollars that are spent from the school level aligning with maybe things we could do at the district level as well, and really trying to open that dialogue up so that we have some of those kinds of things. We can monitor that. We are assessing using Ames Web. We know where foundational skills are missing in students, and they do those Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions every day. The work is, as we've heard from the staff today, is very hard work. Every student is different when they look at those things, and we don't have an answer, but what we do know is having people there working with the students in a coordinated way is the best way to get that done. And some of these things, someone mentioned the educational assistants that already exist in those schools, or even some of the interventions that exist there. Some of those would be lost this year with some of the state funding from the grants that I mentioned before leaving. So some of this initiative keeps some of those people there to continue to try to make this work as we try to get some traction.
Okay, because I also know it depends on how, when you talk about Project Grad and what they do now, when they first came on board, they dealt with reading and math and school climate and cultural discipline and all that good stuff. And they had a process they used for reading that was working. Our kids were being their literacy rate was increasing. Then Knox County decided they're duplicating services as far as what goes on in another school area should be able to work in District 1 because everybody learns the same way, which is not true. So when they did that and they pulled it away from Project Grad and decided you can do family support and not necessarily academic, reading level went down. We haven't recuperated yet. So my thing is, if we're going to continue to take the resources and say we can do it better or we're going to do it better and we don't, then my kids in the District 1 or whoever, they're not going to continue, well, in Project Grad area, period. They're not going to ever catch up if we don't figure out what works best with our kids. It can't be the same for everybody. And so I'm not trying to say you're not trying hard. I'm just saying we've been doing this for a while and we still haven't figured it out. And even though you might be sending the same people in there, if it hasn't worked, we're going to have to figure out what does work. And if it goes back to what used to work, and maybe the teachers will know better. I don't know. I mean, have we talked to the teachers that actually work with these kids and find out exactly what needs to happen in order to make it work? But I'm just saying we need to do something a little different. I just don't want to spend good money if we're not making a big difference. And I'm sorry to keep saying this, but I feel like we have better than 11% proficiency in the school system. I don't know I don't know how you're checking the data. I don't know how you're evaluating it, but it has to be better than 11% for the kids that's been there from K through 8.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Owen?
I was in one of those Project Grad schools, and in between my classes every day, I tutored a student in reading. That was one of my requirements. The program came in and it was taken out very quickly, just like every other program we've had in Knox County schools. We bring it in and then something new comes along to override it before the people who are using a program even really feel solid in using that program. And it happens continually. And at some point we have to realize that our teachers and our students
can't have that continual turnover in what we are providing for them. It's ridiculous to have to be trained over and over and over in the exact same thing but a different way. So this year it's going to be blue, and next year we're going to turn it upside down and paint it green, and the year after that we're going to turn it sideways and paint it purple. We can't keep doing that over and over. Over the past 3 months, there were 9 meetings, one in each of our districts, to gain input from the community regarding priorities for our strategic plan for the next 3 years. And though those meetings were not specific to what we are discussing here right now, I think it would be foolish to consider creating a budget without considering input from those meetings. And it shocks me that our staff seems to be fully ignoring those community priorities that we spent months compiling. I've pulled out just a few of those comments that came up over and over and are specific to our conversation today. The first question the community was asked was, in what areas is Knox County Schools doing well? And their answers were that community volunteers and partnerships, a unique school system and offerings of strong magnet schools, trying different innovative things in schools like magnet and STEM, school autonomy to solve school-related issues, school choice within Knox County Public Schools, working with corporations, organizations to mentor in schools, a variety of programs for students not found in other districts. When asked, in what areas does Knox County need to improve? Diversity of staff needs to be expanded. Schools need more support staff, social workers, counselors. We need to look at alternative learning styles. We need to raise teacher pay to compete with other counties. Kids need to be fed. Listen to teachers. We need to improve pay. Panda Express managers start at $50,000 plus a bonus. Teachers pay for supplies out of their own pockets. Books need to be updated. Build relationships in the community. Better mental health services in schools and more nursing and services. Medical, physical, and mental. Increase pay for teachers. Teachers and staff need to reflect the diversity of Knox County schools. Provide stronger supports for teachers, especially in high-needs schools. Retain and recruit quality teachers of color with pay and training. More internships and work studies for students. More teacher support and teacher autonomy. Further grow partnerships. We need resources for social and emotional needs. A KCS budget to reflect that they are covering more than academics. More flexibility in approaching student educational needs. Give teachers more ownership of decisions. More flexibility and empowerment for teachers and administrators to work with children. We'd like to see more emphasis and opportunities for gifted and honor students and AP programs. To the question of what would you like to see initiated in the future? Non-traditional classrooms and broader structures for schools to operate within instead of one size fits all. Pay increase for classified staff. Choice of electives in middle school. Support for students in trauma. One-to-one tutoring for both discipline and academic needs. More representation for the underrepresented. Retain increased funding for ancillary groups like Project Grad. Support priority schools. Request increase in the budget for Knox County schools from the local government, from county commission and property tax. A dedicated social worker for every school. Increased funding across the board. Counselors for each grade make a difference. Funding for extracurricular programs, travel, and equipment. All of these things, these are just a few. They are all under the strategic plan on the website. I only pulled ones that I saw over and over and that were specific to our conversation today, because there are many, many pages of them. These were all created long before this budget. These are not things that are a response to our budget. This is what our community said before we ever considered this budget. The rest of this is what I have expressed to Mr. Thomas over the past several weeks, but I think it's important for the full board to hear it as well. There have been times in Knox County schools when a school staff has become ineffective or inefficient to the point that the district had to look at reconstituting either the administration of that school or the entire school staff. Currently, I believe we are experiencing acute symptoms
of an executive team that has become ineffective, inefficient, and out of touch with our communities, our teachers, our students, and their needs, to the point that the only way to get back on track will be to reconstitute the team. Mr. Thomas, you and this board and this community, I know I've said this before, we should have never been put in the situation we are in today. I cannot imagine any honest scenario in which springing these changes on the community would have been cheered. Instead, I feel so deeply that I know that this was no accident. Its timing was no accident. Holding the budget to be published at the very last minute was no accident. I implore you to please look deeply and seriously at those who are advising you. I have followed your work with budgets for a very long time. I know that you could sit with this budget, with any budget, all by yourself and bring something far, far better without advice from those who so clearly do not seem to have student interests as their top priority. I know that all by yourself, you could sit with this budget and create something that we could be very proud of. That would also be a creative way to save $1 million.
Ms. Fugit, if I could ask the audience, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I've been on this board 8 years. Every so often, there's something that fills our room, but it's our board meeting, and we appreciate your support, but if you could please just let us have our discussion. And look, you're going to like what I'm going to say, so trust that I'm not upset. I'm not taking the contrarian side. I've just been here 8 years, and about every 6 months, this auditorium fills with people who desperately want something from our school system. And there's never enough money. Our community has a real decision to make. But be that as it may, Madam Chair, I'm offering a substitute motion to approve a budget of $490,230,000, which would include a 2% raise for teachers and restore the entire funding for the 3 programs that have been cut. We have a substitute motion.
I'll second.
Beth is second. Speak to my motion. Yes. Thank you. The reason I'm doing this is not to score brownie points. It is that I have been on this board for 8 years. About 5 years ago, we went before our elected body, that is our funding body, and we asked for $35 million. Our request was denied, and we had a lot of community support for it. I understand it is no fun to be the funding body. But this conversation only happens in this room with the school board. And the school board manages the funding it gets as best it can. Everything everybody asked for and every comment we heard is valid. We do need to do more for gifted and talented. I'm a big believer in magnet programs, and I don't think we ought to make people compete. They were designed years ago under the OCR. I just think it's time. I hear it every time we have one of these meetings, when it's build a building, when it's fund a program, when it's not cut this. Community may get what they want, and every time they walk out, I say, please stay engaged. Please talk to the funding body. Please share with them our priorities. In the last 15 years,
The percentage of the Knox County budget that goes to education has decreased from around 66% to around 62% of the budget. We are getting more money every year. I've heard that. Yes, we do. We get more money every year, but everything costs more every year too. So this year is it's pension plan, it's health insurance. Part of the reason I'm proposing the 2% increase for staff is because their insurance is going to go up too. So while we're paying more, they're going to pay more, and if we don't do something to increase their pay, they may bring home less. So that was my thought behind this. I'll leave it at that.
Other discussion? Ms. Kuntz?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Board and Superintendent Thomas, for your consideration of this budget, the voices in the room, and your proposal, Ms. Fugit. I think that's wonderful leadership. However, I would still like to share that my personal perspective, and that you ask that you consider this perspective. So when I transferred to West, it was considered a magnet program, and although it's not considered that anymore, I still feel that I'm able to speak to my experience and share with you just one lesson that I've learned being at this magnet school. My school is richly diverse, and I've seen it become more and more united between all socioeconomic levels and cultures, which is exactly what magnet schools were created to do. They're meant to unite communities of rich diversity in many different walks of life. And I feel like magnet programs not only provide the educational equity to students that they deserve, but they provide at-risk students the holistic care and support that they need to climb up this hierarchy of needs. And so I think one of the really big, simple concepts that is often overlooked whenever talking about student achievement is this hierarchy of needs. Students everyone starts off in their life needing these physiological needs to be met: food, water, shelter, sleep, and clothing. And some of these students you're talking about in these at-risk schools who can't read don't have those things when they come home. Next is safety needs, personal security and resources and health. They don't have those either. Next is love and belonging, friendship and family, and the sense of connection that many students lack, especially in these at-risk schools, my school included. Esteem is next above that, which is respect, self-esteem, status and recognition, strength and freedom that I feel like many people do not feel, especially students in these certain environments, especially in the at-risk communities. And then on the very top is self-actualization, the desire to become more than the most that they can be, the desire to better themselves. Scores like reading come from that self-actualization, that drive to push themselves to excel in something that's more abstract than simply their food and shelter and sleep and clothing. And so I say that not to give you a science lesson, but to tell you that these magnet programs and Project Grad and all of these programs that offer students this support not only provide them extra educational opportunities that they need to express themselves, that they need to grow, but provide a community for these people for these students to gain that support system, to gain those fundamental needs that they have. In my magnet school, it's not only just a certain curriculum, but it is a community that provides, and it's the specialized staff that comes in with the intention to make these kids' lives not only enriched educationally, but personally, are there to support their kids in all different ways. Project Grad providing simple services such as food and clothing. These things need to be met before the reading scores. And I feel like that it's kind of lost sometimes whenever looking at these, deficiencies, and we keep asking, what's the problem? What do they really need? And it's all of those things before you can say, let's throw in more support for reading experts or whatever. They need people to stay. And speaking to Ms. Owens' point about the constant change, that is extremely detrimental to students who grow up in environments where nothing in their life is constant. And so one thing that I believe was the best lesson I learned from my school, and going and graduating now, I've been challenged to really think about what is it that this school provided me that I wouldn't have gotten necessarily at my other school or in a different environment that wasn't as richly diverse and so supportive. And I was able to ask myself over these 4 years, what are the implications of my actions, not only on my own life, but more importantly on other people's lives? And I say this not only to demonstrate how my program has challenged me to get to that self-actualization level and provide that community to do so, but to also ask the same of you all. I really would like to make it very clear that these decisions are so important that you're making. And I ask that you please carefully consider the implications that the actions have on at-risk communities in Knox County. And I know you have, but maybe let's take it a little step further. I do not believe that these cuts were made in ill will, but I do believe that discrimination and disparities are perpetuated through ignorance. And so I ask that in the future, ask those questions that no one wants to ask, those difficult questions like, will this policy disproportionately affect any population in Knox County? Are we basing our actions off of unbiased and truthful data? Are we making these decisions out of integrity, intention, and equity? Or are we settling for less than we deserve? Is there anything that we can do to ask for help? Is there anyone else who can do this better than us? These are just a few of the questions that need to be considered when making any decision, not just this budget. I say this because I see many people sitting here tonight who feel betrayed, abandoned, and marginalized. But I also see people who have the power and passion to enact change that will progress every walk of life. So I ask that you ask those difficult questions before we're sitting here right now with this dilemma. Ask those difficult questions so that people don't feel like that power that they have is being taken away. Intentional and be considerate, and I thank you all so much for the work you do and the service you do to these people. I am forever grateful to have been here with you, and I know this is coming to an end, but just I ask, please be considerate and be intentional and ask those hard questions, even though they're extremely difficult. Thank you so much.
Board, let me remind you that we have a substitute motion on the floor, so our discussion needs to center around the substitute motion, and I'll go to Mr. McMillan next, and then over to Mr. Norman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to talk a little bit about Ms. Fugett's motion and her comments. First of all, I don't think I could disagree with anything that you said, and I do not believe at the same time that there's anyone sitting around this table that would not like to have the $490 million so that we could restore all the cuts and give the teachers a raise. I truly believe that. But the fact of the matter is that we're at the 11th plus hour. We're within 4 hours plus of May 1st, which the Knox County Charter, which we all took an oath to uphold the charter, says that we shall approve a budget of some description. by May 1st and send it to the mayor. Now, I personally believe that to not approve something would be irresponsible. I think at the same time that if we, I guess what I would speak against the substitute and in favor of the superintendent's motion, and I'll tell you why. That doesn't prohibit us from seeking additional money. I don't think we will get $6 million additional dollars. Now, we might get some, but we can always amend, add to. If we do get additional money, we can always go back and have the argument as to where we want to spend that money at that point. But I firmly believe that we should vote the substitute motion down and support the superintendent's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Norman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'm taking a big chance talking again because the last time I talked, it wasn't received very well. And I want to apologize for any kind of comment and how it was taken. I think that it's hard to communicate just any time, much less try to communicate in front of several hundred people. So I want to apologize if I did offend someone or offend some of you. And I think I'd be glad to talk about this topic with you individually at any time. You can contact me, or I think you could contact anybody that knows me, and they know what my heart is, and they know what my intent is when it comes to disadvantaged kids. Spent my career. I would, now that's an aside. Now I'll get to the topic of money. First of all, the people who pay the bills, the taxpayers, expect us to evaluate programs. Now, we can criticize the evaluation process. We can criticize, as several people did, several of the speakers did, the research data, whatever we picked on. So statistics can be looked at in a lot of different ways. So but nevertheless, the board receives the research. The board also receives the interpretation of the research from the administration. We look at it and think about it ourselves, and then we have to come to some kind of conclusion. And so that's what we've done, and that's what we try to do this and just do the best we can. I do think from some of the folks to characterize this budget as just taken away from people in East Knox or the high poverty schools, I don't think that's fair. I think that Superintendent Thomas's descriptions of how we're trying to reallocate and reemphasize the budget to be used in these places where we obviously have these glaring deficiencies. We've got to focus on those, and I think that's truthfully what the budget is intending to do. Not perfectly, but it certainly is a reasonable attempt. Just as an aside, whoever was responsible for the renaming of talented and gifted, thank you for that. I've always been sort of disturbed about the untalented and ungifted kids, so maybe they won't have to ask that question anymore. We had a massive, obviously a PR failure in terms of how we did this and how this was brought about. there's a number of things that would probably contribute to that. And as another side, I appreciate the speakers tonight being much more civil in terms of their tone and in terms of how they described us. I don't think there's anybody up here that is a bad person in any way. I don't think there's any kind of racial animus. It just doesn't exist. So I appreciate the more civil tone that we've had tonight. My last comment will be to the budgetary side, kind of exclusively, and I'm speaking, and I'll be speaking in opposition to Ms. Fugit's substitute motion, and for reasons that Mr. McMillan said, and then also I think that we are gradually moving towards a different process, and I think it may not be making people happy that it's more of a business type of process, and those terms like management by objectives, site-based management, zero-based budgeting, et cetera. Those are business functions, and there is a business aspect to schools. I like to say that you don't understand schools are not just a business because, and you would understand that if you're a teacher, if you've ever been in the classroom, it's not just a business. It's so much more than that. But if we go about this in a different way from a budgetary standpoint, and I think that that's what we're heading towards, you know, these programs like GRAD and the Magnet program and GT, whatever, these are minuscule in our budget. They're very, very small parts of our budget. And the elephant in the room, we all know, is central management. And so as we go forward, we're going to start to tackle that problem of this grossly overinflated bureaucracy, and I think Ms. Owens sort of was referencing that in a way. So because of that, I'm going to vote against Ms. Fugate's motion, and hopefully we'll be able to support the superintendent's budget. I think it's an act of good faith. It's a signal to our funding body, the commission, that we are really trying to live within our means. And I think that our staff in forming this budget has really tried very hard to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. I don't know, Ms. Owen was first, and then we'll come to you, Ms. Etheridge, and back over to Ms. Fugate.
I'd like to ask Ms. Fugate to restate her motion.
Thank you. My motion was to approve a budget, oh gosh, I'm sorry. Let me flip.
That's the part I actually.
Okay, to approve a budget of $490,230,000. That number I arrived at by adding back what was cut from the Project Grad, Gifted and Talented, and the Magnet schools, and included a 2% raise for all teachers.
Okay, so if we approved that, we are approving a budget.
Yes.
A very specific budget.
Yes,
with
we
those
are.
very specific numbers.
Yes.
So
It is a budget proposal. It is a substitute motion for a budgeted amount, which is all we have to go ask commission for.
So with those specific amounts, Mr. McMillan, does that answer your concern?
Mr. McMillan, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is a budget, but I don't believe that it is a realistic budget at this point. Now, if we had another 2 weeks or so to work on it, we weren't right at the last minute. As I said, Ms. Owen, we need to approve, in my opinion, we need to approve something that's realistic, that the mayor can receive, maybe he can add to, maybe take it to county commission with recommendation, maybe they'll add something else. We can always amend But no, I will not vote for $490 million tonight at this point because it's so late and I don't in the game, and I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's fair to the county commission. Incidentally, I think it was mentioned earlier about the 35 cents that we mentioned or that we tried to get through, and it was 35 cents on the tax rate, and I guess there were three of us that are still here, Ms. Fugit and Mr. Etheridge, and I believe it doesn't matter at this point, but it was so ill received that the phones collapsed in opposition in the city county building, and there was never any motion made that was put on the floor. And it doesn't matter at this point, I don't suppose, but I guess that was their way of rejecting it. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Etheridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to support it, and I'm going to tell you why. I have been on this board since 2010. I have seen 5 different facilities built, and it has taken away from the budget every year. I have seen where BEP has increased by $35.4 million, Knox County by $9.0 million. And I think it's time for us to ask for some more money, bottom line. I mean, if you don't ask, you don't get. Now, I've sit here and listened to all these eloquent, articulate speakers, and if nobody on this board understood the desire and the need and the compassion and how important it is to the people in this room, then there is something wrong with this board. Because somewhere along the line, we have to figure out how to fund the things that's needed for Knox County schools. All we're doing is asking. If they say no, then you have a chance to come back and you do cut your budget back to what it was. But you have to ask in order to receive. I don't understand why we feel like that's our fiduciary duty, is to build a budget that meets the needs of Knox County schools that support our students. That is our business. That is what we're here to do. It really is. We keep cutting programs, cutting positions, cutting central staff, cutting everywhere just to meet a budget because we don't want to ask for what we need for Knox County schools. It's to the point where we can't keep cutting anymore. And it's up to us to make sure that we provide our students in Knox County, all over Knox County, what they need in order to be successful. And if we have to ask, let's ask. And I think, Superintendent, what time is the budget due tomorrow?
I need to defer to Mr. Dupler, I think, on that.
Mr. Dupler.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and the board. So the county charter states that all budgets have to be submitted to the mayor no later than May 1st. So the way I read that would be the close of business tomorrow.
Okay. So I believe that this great staff we have can fill in the blanks and far as filling in the numbers that Ms. Fugit has identified that she is recommending by way of her amendment. So I will be supporting it because I think the only way we can get anything around here is to ask for it.
Ms. Fugit. Thank you. Just for everybody's clarification, every time you clap, it cuts our mics off. So that's why mics can't pick up everybody. I'm just going to respectfully request that we end discussion and do a roll call vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Hill, I did not see I'm sorry. I defer, let Ms. Hill speak, but then I would like a roll call vote.
If the question's called, we'll have to end all discussion. So
I think you have to approve to have the question called.
we have
Okay, fine, sorry.
We'll take a vote on the question. Is that right, Mr. Not at this point?
I just said that I wanted us to go ahead and do a roll call vote on my amended budget.
So do we need to vote on the question or just go ahead and do it? Okay. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, then we will do a roll call vote for the substitute motion. Ms. Hill, will you read, Courtney, will you read that?
Approve the fiscal year 2019 Knox County Board of Education general purpose budget at the major category level for $490,230,000, adding back funding for Project Grad, Gifted and Talented, and Magnet programs, and a 2% raise for teachers.
Okay, so a vote of no or yes, and we will start with Mr. McMillan. Is that okay? Okay. Ms. Coatenay?
Mr. McMillan?
No.
Ms. Roundtree?
No.
Ms. Hill? No. Ms. Horn? No. Ms. Fugit?
Yes.
Mr. Norman?
No.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Ms. Dethridge?
Yes.
Ms. Bounds?
No.
That's a vote of 4 to 5. The motion fails.
6 to 3, sorry. Correction, that's okay. Motion fails, 6 to 3. So now we will go back to approve the fiscal year 2000 Knox County Board of Education general purpose budget. So.
I call for the question, Madam Chair.
Okay. He's called for the question, so we'll start with a roll call vote with Ms. Dethridge.
No. Ms. Owen? No. Mr. Norman?
Yes.
Ms. Fugit? No. Ms. Horn? Yes. Ms. Hill?
What? Oh, go ahead. I just didn't know if we needed a clarification on no yes, but I don't guess we did. Okay. I'm sorry, Ms. Hill.
No, No, I have not, Mr. McMillan, and I'm extremely disturbed that all board members did not get a chance to ask a few questions about the changes that were proposed in this budget. I just think that puts those of us at a huge disadvantage about whether to approve or not approve. I pass.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Ms. Roundtree?
Can't overrule the call for the question, Mr. Duplin. You cannot.
Can't. You have to vote.
No, we were voting. I thought we were voting.
We're voting to approve the budget. He called the question.
Approve the budget. Yes, okay.
Yes.
Ms. Bounds?
Yes.
That's 5 yes votes and 3 no votes and 1 pass. Ms. Hill?
Okay. Well, what did Ms. I missed her vote. Yes, okay. Okay. The vote is 5 yes, 4 no. The motion passes. Okay, Ms. Coatenay.
Item 7, approve the fiscal year 2019 capital improvement plan for $12,400,000.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Roundtree, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Next is board forum. We will start over with Bridge. Board forum, do you have anything?
You don't want to hear it.
Hey, Ms. Owen, Mr. Norman.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Board. I just wanted to let the Board know that tonight would have been the night in our regular workshop that we would have had a presentation on the strategic plan. Ms. Owen referenced it a little. I'm going to ask that it be put on our agenda for our workshop on May 7th so that I can give a 5 to 10 minute report, and Tim Young, who's worked with us, can come give a report.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fugit. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. since I didn't get to speak earlier to the budget issue, I would be in favor, Superintendent, of just giving the county commission a realistic view of what our needs actually are. And because these are important programs that we do need to support. It's also important to note that we're approving these at the major category level and that changes can still be made. So we need several of these. I think if you look around the table, each of us could add several $1 million to the budget just like that, because none of us want to cut anything from the budget. We want to add to the budget. So this is as frustrating for us as it is for the community. And so anyway, I would urge you, Superintendent, to give them a very realistic view of what our budget needs actually are. Thank you.
Ms. Hill.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Dupler, is it correct that this budget that we have passed is at the macro level, and that some of the things that specifics that were presented in the change from Mr. Thomas and can still be looked at and reworked? I have real problems that there were so many questions asked tonight, very legitimate questions on all the programs, and some of it could be so easily tweaked, and there could have been a few things done. Do we still have the ability to do that within the confines of the money that has been voted on?
Thank you, Ms. Hill. The answer is yes. County Commission does approve a ceiling, if you will, and then but once that ceiling is set, particularly in major categories, then this board can make amendments. Still has control over its own budget as it applies to the schools.
So what is proper procedure then if we are wanting to make recommendations or changes within that amount of money that Mr. Thomas has put before us? Is this something we handle individually with him, or is this something that needs to come back to the board? I mean, he was pretty specific about some of the changes and where he thought positions should lie. How does that work?
Eventually, it would have to come before the board, because the board would have to approve it with 5 or more votes. But that could come from different sources. It could come from the director of schools via one-on-one interaction with board members. It could come from a board member in the form of a motion. So several different ways.
Any other? Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Norman, seconded by Mr. McMillan. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Meeting's adjourned.